Hey everyone, welcome back. Thank you for joining me today. I am super excited to be painting with you. Are you one of those people who scrolls through YouTube tutorials and thinks, can I do that? Should I do that? I can barely draw a stick person. Then this is the paint tutorial for you. It is super simple, easy to follow, and I think you'll be surprised with the results. So grab your paintbrushes and I'll show you what paints I'm using today. So I like to start from the top of the canvas. So we're going to start with blue. And as you've seen, I'm using Copenhagen blue. You can use whatever tone of blue you want. If you want it darker or lighter, that's totally up to you and whatever you have already. Okay, so we'll start with a little bit of paint on your plate. I always recommend starting with a little bit because you can always put more on the plate and then we don't waste the paint. But I put a good sized blob on there, medium sized blob, I guess. And we're going to start by swiping the brush along the top, just like that, okay? So we're going to cover this in blue, maybe a little less than a quarter of the way down. Okay, start with that. And no real technique here, just if you start off with a full paintbrush full of paint, and so you go like that, notice there's going to be quite a bit of paint left here, so I'll just go back over it a little bit, and just so that the paint is even and it doesn't take too long to dry. Okay, so just cover that to at least a quarter of the way down, maybe slightly more down. Okay. Okay, so notice that I left a little bit of streaks at the bottom. That's because we're going to end up blending this out, and it's just to kind of get rid of the excess paint that's on my brush. Just wiping the brush a little bit. Okay, and so now we're going to blend that out a little bit with white. So I've got my white here. So I'm going to be using the same brush. If you find that there's just too much paint on that brush, then give it a good little rinse and wipe off onto your napkin. Okay, so I'm going to take some of that white and blend it out a little bit with some of this blue. Not going right to the top, because the top I want to leave kind of that solid blue color. So when you're doing your blending, just don't go right to the top. And there's no real trick to this. Blending it, once you start getting a feel for it, like, it's kind of fun. This is the fun part of the painting. You can take a little bit of that lighter color and bring it right up into here, swipe it a bit, kind of creating a little bit more of like a misty cloud look. I really like that look. You can do whatever you desire. There's no right or wrong here. And everyone's canvas is going to look different. And it also shows some of your personality. We all have different personalities, so of course it's going to be a little bit different than what you see here or what you see on someone else's painting. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start adding a little bit more color. While this top area is kind of drying a little bit, I'm going to start from the bottom, and I'm going to be using that Christmas red. Again, you can use any shade of red that you would like. So if you have some paint that's been sitting on the shelf that needs to get used up, now is the time. Okay, so I'm going to give my large brush a little bit of a rinse. Okay. And starting from the bottom, and if it's easier for you to flip this guy upside down and paint this way, that is just fine. It's up to you, whatever you would like to do. And I will add that I'm not painting the sides of this canvas, but if you would like to do that, I would suggest painting the sides as you go, so then it gets the same type of blend as the front. And with the red, we're going to be going same thing as the blue, like just over a quarter of the way down on the canvas. Again, the same thing with the blue. I just wiped off my brush a little bit on the bottom, or in the middle, I guess, and I'm gonna let that be part of the blend. Okay, so speaking of blending, we're now going to use our yellow while the red is still wet. And actually this works better if the lighter blue area is still wet as well, because we're going to be doing some blending up there too. Okay, I'm going to flip this guy around. Right now, kind of looking like a popsicle, maybe? But don't worry, we're going to get there. This is going to be pretty. Okay, so I'm still using the same like dirty brush. It still has red on it. That's going to assist, I think, a little bit with the blend. So I'm going to get that on there. And long streaks. Okay, so this is where the fun part starts. So now that you've got your base where these colors are, we're going to do something that's completely unnatural. We're going to start colliding these colors now that we have them nicely separated. So I'm going to take some of that yellow, reddish color, and I'm going to just throw it over just a couple of blobs like that. And then I'm going to swipe over them just lightly, and not even all the way to the side. And we're starting to create some sunset cloud shapes and colors. So there's no real rules to this either. If you want to just add like straight yellow in some spots. I like going over it with my brush because it gives it that kind of wispy look. So feel free to add just straight yellow, or even like go really crazy and add some red in there and blend it out. It's whatever you desire, whatever you think will look good. Feel free to also make some other shapes, like You could make more cloud shapes by dotting your brush like so, just dabbing along. And you could make some cloud shapes like that. I'll show it to you again, but I'm not gonna, well, I might leave these, we'll see. I like the wispy look for this kind of painting. But I'm just taking the edge of my large brush, and you could use a medium brush as well, and dipping it into the paint so that there's that little spot on the end. And making little clouds. And I like these clouds with a little bit of color in them. It picks up that color. That's one of the most beautiful things, is seeing clouds in the sunset, and it's just so gorgeous. If you follow me on Instagram, you probably know that I really like clouds. And so I have a lot of pictures of clouds, and especially in Saskatchewan, fantastic sunsets. The clouds are just brilliant. Orange, pinks, purples, it's just amazing. Okay, adding a bit of color to this one. Okay. Alright, you've sold me on leaving the clouds, so I'll leave the clouds here, because I think they are quite beautiful. Another thing that I saw the other day is the sunset was lighting up this cloud into a beautiful, brilliant pink. Okay, and why this was so amazing is because this cloud was a little bit in the distance, and in Saskatchewan you can see the clouds for forever. So this cloud was sweeping across the plains, and it was raining. So it was leaving like this trail, this beautiful veil of rain as it went along. And because of the sunset, the rain was actually pink in color. Quite beautiful. Obviously, like, it's very hard to capture something so amazing with just a camera phone, but in person is always better. But if you want to see what that looks like from an imperfect, you know, just regular camera phone, go check out my Instagram page at daralynnpainting. And tell me what you think of that. Pink rain. Okay, so I created a few little clouds there. And just gonna add a little bit of color. Okay, so I think that's all I'm gonna do for that one. So if the clouds are kind of intimidating, you don't need to use them. You don't need to worry about them. And what's great about this, okay, so let me see. Say I went like this and I made a cloud and I didn't really like it very much, and I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? While it's still wet, blend it out. You could even grab some of that blue color and swipe over top of it. Ta-da! It's gone. And just make it part of your creation. And if you find you go a little bit too overboard with one color and you're like, oh, but I lost all of my red, whatever, just go back in. And if it's too wet and just blends too much, then give it a quick blow dry with the hair dryer, or just let it rest for a while until it dries, and then go back in again. Okay, so no pressure. And of course you can try this tutorial multiple times and you will get multiple outcomes. At least I do. Okay, there's my sunset. I think it's looking pretty good. Let me blend this side out a little. If you want to try it with just the streaks, that's fine. If you want to try the clouds, go for it. Try both. You could paint it one way and then paint it the other way. Either way, this is a timeless technique and painting. And the silhouettes that go on in the front, like today we're going to be doing like a grassy silhouette, but you could do silhouettes of practically anything. So this is really fun. This is a really fun place to start if you're a beginner. Okay, I think that I'm finished with the background, so I'm gonna let that dry. I cannot find my hairdryer. I'm not sure what I did with that little one that I usually use. So I'm just going to let this air dry, maybe even do like the little canvas dance. If you've ever been to one of my paint parties, you know all about the canvas dance. Just wave the canvas and let it dry, and we'll continue on after that. Pretty good. So I'm ready for the next step. So now, once your canvas is all dry, we're going to start with our silhouette. So I have my black paint here. And find some room on your canvas, or grab another plate, or wash off your palette. And I'm going to be using my small brush. Okay. And it doesn't really matter like how small or whatever, like it's, to me anyway. I just grab a small brush from the pile. This one is a size 3, but I don't usually go by sizes. I just grab whatever I think looks good. So this is what I'm using, and whatever brush you have at your disposal, I'm sure is just fine. Okay, and if you have a round brush, or your brush is like a little bit too big or something, I'm going to show you a little trick to use whatever brush you have. Okay, so we're going to start by tracing out where you want the ground to be, okay? So I'm going to have my ground down here. I'm going to start out a little bit higher and then kind of swoop down. Okay. And have it high up here too. Just like that. Okay. So just kind of map out approximately where you want the ground to be. And then, oops, we'll worry about filling that in a little later. Okay, so we dip the brush in, and you can either twist it and give it a little twirl, like that. Or what's easy is to dip it in and wipe one side and then wipe the other side. And then it kind of flattens the brush and gives it more of like a little pencil. So you don't want your brush too heavy with paint. Wipe both sides, and then it's ready to go. Now I know that this is the scary part because you've just created this beautiful background and now you've put black paint on top of it. But don't be nervous. We'll just go slow, take it easy, take it one stem at a time, okay? And you'll be just fine. So I found that the difference between this painting looking beginner and not beginner all comes down to the size of the stem, okay? So with that technique that I showed you, wiping off your brush both sides and making it more like a pencil, then this will create thinner lines. And yes, I have paint all over me. That is a must for a paint party or any kind of paint session, in my opinion. Okay, so we're just going to create a few stems. So I wipe both sides. Now it's kind of like a pencil, so I'm just going in very lightly. And creating a stem. Okay. Just one swoop. And if you have like a streaky line like that, that is okay, because you can always go over the line a second time and fix up those little spots. But just be careful not to add too much thickness to these stems. Okay, there's a couple there. And I'm gonna do a couple going in front of each other. So I'm gonna start one over here. And I'm kind of crossing over. Okay, so we'll try to stagger the height a little bit. That adds a little bit more realism. It makes it just look a little bit better than having them all the same height. Okay, and then trying to keep that stem as thin as possible. Okay, I think 4 of those is suffice for now. Okay, so now I'm going to do the top of the cattail. So I'll start with this guy because we can see him quite easily. Okay, starting in the middle, and then with the brush strokes, I'm just adding a little bit to each side until it's about the thickness that I want. And I think it looks pretty good. So making that little hot dog shape on top. And same with this. I'm gonna have this going over some of my cloud. And that's why it's good that this was dry. Okay, so now we are going to add the little leafy parts of the cattail. Not sure if it's called leaves or not, but the grassy parts that come from the bottom. So, okay, let's start with this one here. So I'm gonna have it coming off the stem, and you can make your brush strokes quite wide from this point, okay? And then have it nice wide stroke, and then back to the smaller stroke and have it coming down like that. And try to get a nice little light point on the end. Okay, just like that. You can also add larger pieces coming up the front. Like that. And have this come down to the side like it's, you're seeing a different angle. Okay, so you can do that to most if not all of them, and I'd recommend having some of the shoots be, let's see, what's a good example? Okay, so for this one, having the shoot come off near the bottom and not too high up. Okay, but then adding another one higher up, and maybe crossing over a little bit. So it's just becoming more realistic, and I would say to not have one of these leaves coming off every one. Like this one, I think maybe I'll do like one and then leave the other side. Just have it kind of twirl on the end. Maybe add a little bit of stringiness on that one. Okay. Now these are starting to look like weird little people dancing away. Again, that is why you don't want to have two, because you don't want it to look like some weird little dance thing that's going on. Oh goodness. Amuse myself. It's good. It's good to laugh at yourself. It'd be weird. That's part of being an artist, I think. It comes with the territory. Here, and with this guy I'm just gonna dot along here a little bit to make him look a little bit fuzzy, because he's getting ready to turn into fluff. If some of you have seen cattails like that, it's quite interesting. And maybe a little bit of fuzz on this guy too. Just little dots with the end of the brush. If you want, you don't have to. If you want them all pretty and uniform and looking quite smooth, that is just fine. So that's what I've done with mine. Okay. Okay, now we are ready for some grasses. So this part is fairly simple. Same thing with the small brush. Just flick the brush upwards, adding more pressure to the bottom and then lifting the pressure a little bit. And this is a good place to practice some of your brush techniques and to steady your hand a little bit, is by doing grasses, because it's very forgiving and you have to add quite a bit. So if you accidentally make sort of a little bit of a mistake, then you can cover over it quite simply. Okay. this side here is looking a little bit, oh sorry, this side here is looking a little bit sparse. So I'm going to be adding a tall piece of grass, okay? So here, I'm going to start out like thin, but then I'm going to press my brush and then light again. Okay, so very light, oops. And then having a thicker part near the top, and just have that come down. And cover over that bottom part with some grass. Okay, just to add a little bit of interest. And you could add just like a random stick, like in this area, for example. It's just looking a little bit sparse, so I'm just gonna add both sides. Just a little stick. And you know how it goes with swamps and lakes and anywhere that there's water and all of these, like there's reeds, there's put pieces of grass just randomly. So it kind of adds to the effect that this is a bunch of grass, as if we have random little things like this. And it kind of adds a little bit of interest. Okay, another thing too is if you have a flat brush, if you want to try this, this is my medium-sized flat brush that I have. If you swipe up like this, and even start down here, because down here doesn't matter, like, I mean, who cares about that, because we're going to cover it over anyway, but you could start here and then swipe, oops, and it adds some of the grass a little bit thicker near the bottom, like that. I know it doesn't look super great right now, but we're still working on it, and then it kind of blends in that line that we made for the ground. We don't really want to see that line. So. Okay, and I'm just going to use the side of the brush, like straight up and down like this, and add some tall pieces as well. And don't be afraid to go on like some angles. Makes it more realistic for sure. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and fill in the bottom with my medium-sized brush. And there's no particular technique or anything, just fill it in. So once you have that filled in, you can go back and look at things that you missed or things that you might want to add. Maybe you want to add more grass. I'm noticing that my cattails, now that they're dry, they're looking a little bit more gray. So I'm going to just quickly go over them a little bit with black and make sure they're like a nice solid silhouette. I'm just adding a couple little beauty marks. As you can see, I'm just adding a couple little dots just to add something, like maybe there's some bugs flying around. And another thing that you could add too is if you wanted to add some birds. I'm personally not going to add any today, but just maybe a couple little bugs floating around in the background somewhere. I think kind of adds to the painting just a little bit. And that's all for this sunset and silhouette painting tutorial. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate your support. Don't forget to like and subscribe this video if you enjoyed it. Also, if you notice the painting behind me, that is my Something Sunny Sunflower painting tutorial. It is also on YouTube, so feel free to check that out. Okay, if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, please tag me in your creations. I would love to see what you do. I would love to see your creativity and personal style and learn from you as well. Okay, I hope we get to paint again sometime soon. Stay creative. Bye.